Milliken, if you want to include our founder and board vice chair's experience in Harlem. And then after that, for decades after that, we continued to focus on relationships with those groups. In 2017, we came together with the Search Institute, one of the nation's leading research organizations for youth supports and development. And they had, and now we've been partnering with them for decades as well, but this time they had some very specific research around the power of relationships. And it was just intuitive for us to come together with the Search Institute and develop training tools and resources. And then in 2018, 19, and 20, activate those resources through a demonstration in our network. And now we're at a point where we're going, okay, what else do we do with this? What else can we do? How can we apply all of this moving forward? What does innovation of all of these materials look like? And that's why we're here today. This is the work of communities and schools. It's our theory of change. And how I typically develop this and talk about this is by saying, we want everything that's on the right-hand side of the screen, increasing college and career readiness and civic engagement, increasing graduation rates, reducing dropout rates, and certainly improving attendance, behavior, and coursework, right? Everything on the right-hand side of the screen is what we all want, no matter what community or youth development or youth service worker you're talking to. You can't achieve any of that without first talking about or addressing social, emotional, and academic competencies, right? We have to teach kids and help them develop skills that will help them make friends and keep friends, regulate, identify their emotions, communicate their emotions, communicate to others. Those are some really delicate topics, and we can't address those until we develop relationships with them as caring adults. We've been talking about this for a while. And then at our core, and we've also heard Bill Milliken talk about it, write about it in his books, programs don't change people, relationships do, right? Just further emphasizing the importance of relationships in our lives. There is a ton of research around the power of relationships, thankfully, and thanks to the Search Institute for bringing all of that together when we did partner with them. We don't have time, certainly, to go through that. That's a whole other semester in undergraduate to go through all of the research. Phyllis, I'm going to stop talking for just a moment because I've got quite a bit of noise in my background. Can you hear that?
Just lightly. We can hear you really well, though.
Okay, great. Then I'll make sure to continue to project to this mic 2 feet from my face, and hopefully I'll drown out the noise in the background. Thanks for your patience. So here are some of the concepts, though. We can't go through the research, but we can certainly elevate some of the concepts that we pulled from that. I want you all to just quickly read through that, and using your annotation tool, and I'm going to model that for you. I'm going to select the star, and I'm going to identify the one that really resonates with me today. But go through that, and then using the annotation, the stamp mark, the heart, the arrow, the star, mark the one that you identify with, the one that resonates with you today. Thanks. I see a couple coming up. All right, we have a few coming up, and I'm guessing a few folks are still struggling to find the annotation. Keep going, it's all right. I'll tell you the one I picked is the environments around young people shape their development, and relationships powerfully influence that process. We're still talking about students here, but this is where we began to shift in our work and think, wait a minute, this is true of grown-ups too, right? Relationships are the single most important factor in our development, right? We develop through the influence of our guardians, our parents, teachers, mentors, pastors, neighbors. Relationships help build our life skills. We learn something. They promote resilience. They change our attitudes and behaviors. And successful organizations and programs emphasize the relationships between colleagues, right? between supervisors and reports and amongst ourselves. Think about your schools, those of you working in a really positive environment. Don't relationships have a lot to do with that? Because we're not working in a vacuum. So this is where we started to question the Search Institute, saying, hey, have you guys thought about rolling this out for the grown-ups? And they said, we haven't. We're a youth serving organization, but if you want to address it organizationally, go for it. So we kept going. I'm going to go ahead and clear these drawings and keep going. I'm going to give you a second to just read through this quote. Nothing has more impact in the life of a child than a positive relationship, said by the late Peter Benson, a former CEO of the Search Institute. So all of these quotes summarize the critical research that we found to represent the power of relationships, right? What they found moving forward is that relationships are the active ingredient in change, in changing lives. But then the question was, what is it about relationships though? Is it just making eye contact? Is it greeting somebody in the morning? Is it saying, was it me and Phyllis sharing something about our personal lives right before everybody came on? Was that enough to build a positive and developmental relationship? So let's keep going. The Search Institute has identified developmental relationships as those connections through which young people discover who they are, gain abilities to shape their own lives, and learn how to interact and contribute to the world around them. For kids, critical that they have a caring adult to do that with, right? At least one adult that helps them develop, create developmental relationships. That is how they're defining developmental relationships. Now, the framework that they rolled out is here. The framework is the inclusion of 5 elements. These 5 elements, when present, represent a developmental relationship. So they got closer to uncovering that miracle that we all knew was a relationship by saying you have to express care, you have to challenge growth, you've got to provide support, you've got to share power, and you have to expand possibilities, right? So when we say we're building a relationship with a child, that's great. Yes, greeting them in the morning, checking in with them during the day, letting them know that you know they were absent yesterday, making eye contact with them, calling them if they don't show up to school, including them in activities. But more formally, more structured is this framework, making sure that they have a caring adult who's expressing care, check, challenging their growth, providing support, sharing power, and expanding all possibilities. The more elements of these that were present in a relationship, that's a developmental relationship. And then moving forward, here are some definitions. I'll let you read through, and then we'll go through them together. This is the framework. And when we talk about building a developmental relationship with a student, and we're going to talk about colleagues in just a moment, this is what we mean. Some of you in the room have already taken an assessment that we call a developmental relationship in my organization. This isn't the one where you identify people. This is the one where you get to score yourself and you get to mark where you're the strongest in and where you need a little bit of work, right? Because as a professional, it's absolutely expected for us to recognize our strengths and to recognize our opportunities and then create a plan of action around those opportunities, right? So I am really open to saying that I am super strong when it comes to express care, but I don't do, let me see if I got my arrow ready. Here we go. But share power is where I need a little bit of work. So Patty does express care really well, and share power, I really need to think about it. I need to act it out. I need to write it down. I need to be intentional about that. So I'm going to ask you all to do the same without having taken the assessment. For those of you that have and have already scored yourselves and you know where you stand, use a star or a heart to identify where you're the strongest, and then use your stamp, your X stamp, to identify where you need a little bit of work, and you recognize that. What comes naturally to you? That would be your strongest for those of you that haven't taken the assessment. Do you easily believe in people, encourage, listen, express care? Is just that. We express care. Thank you so much. And what's a little harder for you? Great. Excellent. This work, like so much of the social emotional learning work, involves a lot of self-reflection, right? It involves us knowing where we're starting, where we come from, why we've developed these habits, these behaviors, these beliefs, and then determining whether or not something needs to change, and then taking the steps to change those. So thank you so much for your honesty and authenticity in identifying, yeah, I could do this really well. And yeah, share power, not so much. I really want to learn a little bit more about that. Okay, I'm going to keep moving. More about developmental relationships, and let me clear all drawings too. More about developmental relationships here is, one second while I advance. Again, more research and statistics, some of it really powerful. 16% of kids of a survey, a study that the Search Institute conducted of 25,000 students, 16% of those reported having all 5 developmental relationships, or having 5 developmental relationships. That meant that in their lives, they had at least 5 people who provided at least 3 of those 5 elements, right? That's pretty good. They had somebody in their life who cared, provided support, possibly shared power, possibly all 5 of the elements. However, there were also 1 in 5 kids having 0 developmental relationships. Knowing that each additional developmental relationship is linked to statistically significant higher levels of caring, responsibility, social emotional skills, and decision-making skills, this became really critical, right? For communities and schools to step forward and say, this is something we can do. We can learn how to provide a developmental relationship, really just stepping up our relationship game, because we've been doing this for 45 years or more, and providing all of the elements so that they have more developmental relationships in their lives. This is it. That is developmental relationships in about 20 minutes. And I felt it critical to really get everybody on the same page before we dove into what this work looks like for the grown-ups. What if became the question for us? We use this with our colleagues. What if we used this framework with our teachers and got everybody speaking the same language? What if school administrators and teachers and counselors and parent liaisons and social workers and communities in schools began to model the language, the practices and activities of the developmental relationship framework? I'm going to show you a quick video and then we're going to come back to the grown-ups.
Why do I gotta go first?
You seemed ready to me.
I can see my face now. I can't believe I'm on the news. I like Lucy Lenny, and All About It is this beautiful.
On Sunday, I take a shower, I go to sleep, and then I wake up, I'll be like, time to go to school.
Ever since I've been here, I've never had a day where I just never wanted to come back. I've always loved this school.
Lucy Craft Laney, she had in mind to build a school because she was a school teacher for kids who don't get learning because, back then, black was bad, white was good, blech. That's what makes this place really special because as you look around you, you realize that this, even though there's lots of dangerous things over like by this area, a lot of students still like to call this place home, and I'm one of them. I'm proud to be one of them, actually, because
In second grade, I didn't feel like I belonged there, but now as I'm at this school, it makes me feel special, cool, and that I could fit in.
my teacher told me that I'm a good math person, and then she told me when I grow up I could be a math teacher. Nobody never told me that, so it made me feel good.
My favorite teacher is Miss Lemmy because when I hug her, she has caramel chocolate cheeks.
Everybody's so nice. Like, I hope you come here, whoever's watching.
Nice work. Give me 5.
Bye.
What did you all hear here that made you think that this was a positive environment? What were the kids saying? What did you hear? And you can use the chat or you can raise your hand. For example, I heard people are welcome here. What else did you hear?
I heard that they care for me. They care about me, they care for me.
Right.
I heard they love me.
Yeah, I can be anything. They love me, they care for me. This is a welcome place. I really like it here. I wish more people would come here, right? What a great environment, a climate to come to for children. And developmental relationship framework was a big part of that. We building that relationship rich environment begins with the grown-ups. They did not bring that to school with them. That was a gift provided to them by the grown-ups in that building, because the grown-ups felt that genuinely and the kids felt that, right? Don't you all feel that positive energy or negative when you walk into a room or into a place of business or into a home? You just kind of absorb that, and these kids are absorbing the energy that the grown-ups are putting out. And the developmental relationship framework was a big part of that at Lucy Laney Elementary School. This is Lucy Laney Elementary School. You can learn more about this Minneapolis school online and Google that, but they partnered with the Search Institute as well for this work. The developmental relationship framework, much like these products on the screen, was not originally developed to work with grown-ups. So the question here is, what do Play-Doh, bubble wrap, Post-it notes, and treadmills have in common? They were all created for one purpose. I just realized I've got a big old stamp on the screen. There we go. They were all created for one purpose and were found to be very useful for something very different. Before I tell you what they were, I mean, if you know what it is, go ahead and put it in the chat box. But the developmental relationships framework, again, was created for kids, and we're now beginning to play with it. Communities and Schools is, and a few other organizations are, around helping improve communication, relationships, growth patterns, employee engagement in organizations too. And I will reveal what these products were originally meant for. I've got them here. I have a cheat sheet. Play-Doh was originally developed to be a wallpaper cleaner. Bubble wrap was originally developed to be wallpaper. Treadmill was originally developed as punishment for prisoners. It also was used to grind grain. And finally, Post-its were used as an adhesive that didn't really stick. And we know now that those other items didn't really stick. I don't know about you all, but bubble wrap is wallpaper, not so much. But they did stick as some other really useful products for efficiency, effectiveness, toys for kids, and health, right? Much like, again, DR. I've got a quote here from Lauren, who is the Chief Strategy Officer for Communities and Schools of San Antonio. CIS of San Antonio and a number of other organizations, youth serving organizations, were a part of a 2018, 2017, I think, Search Institute ROI initiative, Relationships for Outcomes. And they too, in their work with kids, said this could be really helpful with grown-ups. I'll let you read that really quickly. If you're not expressing these elements from adult to adult, and the students aren't seeing you model that in your adult life, how much are they really going to buy into the relational framework? As a part of that ROI work, they also picked up some themes, the Search Institute did. They saw that organizations that they had partnered with to research this work on kids were using it to build a sense of team. They were sharing language, right? They had all been trained and had been given a glossary around what these elements were and how to use it. They were using it in their recruitment and hiring process. Some of them developed their own tools as a checklist to make sure that the right people were working with kids, people that were open to building relationships with students, who knew about boundary settings and who were open to learning this new framework. They were using it in employee coaching during their check-ins and trainings regularly. So this language, everybody was on the same page about it, and they began to use it in their employee coaching. They used it in their staff meetings. And then finally, because we understand that the culture of an organization often begins with the leadership was brought in into the language and the framework as well. So how do we do this? How do we build developmental relationships with kids or with grown-ups? You either do it by relationship building practices, and you do it by implementing activities. And practices is the climate. Think of an environment, the feeling, the energy you feel when you walk into a room. Think of the language that the people are using. Think of what you're seeing modeled. Think of that. It's an environment, a culture. The relationship building activities are more structured. They're tangible. It's something with a beginning and an end. Think of the morning greetings or your afternoon greetings. Think of the small curriculum-based support groups that are run in schools. Those are all samples of activities, right? So through practices and activities is how we build developmental relationships with students or with grown-ups. So let's take a closer look, and let's start with some examples. So on the left-hand side, we've got practices. Again, those are the relational techniques. How do I relate to my colleagues? This makes a task or situation more relational, more personable. This can happen anytime, anywhere. It doesn't have to be an activity. It is the language we use to greet one another in the mornings. It is how we start a meeting on a Monday. It is how we start an all-staff event. It could be how we welcome parents, colleagues, students into our offices. These are often unplanned and subconscious because this is just how we think, right? How we do our work. For some of us, it does take a little bit of planning and some conscious level because we recognize that we're not great at all of the elements just yet. So that will take a little bit of practice and thinking and strategizing. These are observable and learnable, but hard to package. Can't really describe it. And an example of this is indirect praise, right? People that often praise others or give others credit for a project that they're working on, recognize somebody's contributions to a project. On the other hand, you've got activities on the right-hand side. So again, we're building developmental relationships through practices and activities. Activities are structured. They start on time, they end. They strengthen the personal connections that we've built through active practices. During time dedicated to, happens during time dedicated to relationship building too, through activities. These are planned, scheduled, observable. You can package these. A great example is any activity you typically run with kids. Think about a way you open either a small group gathering with students or an all-staff meeting. Do you spend any time helping people get to know each other? Do you throw out like, what's your favorite thing to do on a Saturday? To name the top 2 things you love to do. It's a simple question and a way we get to know each other. That's an activity, and that is a relationship building activity. Okay, we have time for an activity right now. We're going to have a conversation about approaches to building developmental relationships through DR, through practices. So these are your climate, your culture, your environment. Think of the energy you're creating in your office space for colleagues, for adults, for grown-ups, right? Phyllis, this is where we're going to break them up into groups. I am going to stop sharing for a moment. Well, actually, I'm going to leave this up for a moment just so that you all can take a look at what we've got. And I'm going to upload a number of documents. Give me a moment to do that.
And we want to do 5 rooms, one for each element. That would put about 7 people in a room, or how many rooms?
We'd love to do more. Whatever room you land in, I'm going to share an element with you. It's called an approaches to element. And we just want you to answer the questions for one element. But you're gonna need this document. So give me a second. And Phyllis, let me know if you see that in the chat. Nope, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Can't quite get it to everybody. I'm gonna stop sharing so that I can do this without having to walk and chew gum. Hold on. It's also relationship building, right? Let's talk about how you can only do one thing at a time.
And that goes back to Grace.
Thank you. It says it's being shared in Zoom. Is it not?
I'm not seeing it in the chat just yet.
How else can we do this? Okay, then we're just going to change up the activity a little bit. Think about, so we are going to divide them into rooms. And I think I would just like for them to pick an element, any element. And it can be a random selection for groups. So you can go ahead and just randomly break them out into groups, Phyllis. And the challenge here, or not the challenge, let me share my screen again. Focus on the questions. When you get into your room, the only thing that's going to be different here is select your element that you want to focus on, express care, challenge growth, provide support, share power, expand possibilities. And then talk about how you would develop this with grown-ups. How can you express care with a grown-up? How do you express care, or how do you challenge growth? And think of a teacher, a counselor, student activities coordinator to school, somebody that you work very closely. If you're not in a school, think about somebody that you work with in the office. And then how do you enter the element here with grown-ups? And then what we'll do is we'll share the handouts when they come back, Phyllis.
Okay, here you go.
We're gonna do that for 7 minutes.
7 minutes, okay.
And I will also broadcast the instructions.
Okay.
And I've got the timer going.
Okay. I set it for 6 with a 1-minute closeout.
Okay.
So is everyone seen and able to join?
They are slowly joining. Remember, you all have to click accept on the screen to be able to join a breakout room. It looks like they're going.
Yep.
I'm going to stop sharing.
There we go.
Yep. I'm going to broadcast some instructions out to everybody.
Okay.
Okay. The Padlet would not have worked here, Phyllis, without those handouts because they had nothing to react to. So what I'll do is I'll bring up the handouts, and as they report back, I'll show the handout and we'll go through it together.
Okay, and we can send that out after.
Yeah.
With some materials, so they'll have that.
I'm bringing it up now.
We had our development team is also basically our tech team, and we had one person leave, and then the other person who's been great in adding things to the to the website. He is getting married right now, so he's out
right now.
through Monday. So we're so happy for him. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it was right during the conference. So we were scurrying to get everything to him before he was off, but it's all good.
I'm just adjusting the handouts. I've got them ready to go.
Okay, we just have someone entering. See if I can move her.
Hey guys, my connection dropped me. Sorry.
You are fine. I'm gonna try to move you into a room. So if you want to catch the end of the session, I'm gonna try. And this is the have grace thing.
Yeah, and my camera's not working for some reason.
You're good. All's good.
I can do it too, Phyllis, if you need me to.
Okay, I'm gonna try to move her to room 5.
Okay.
See how that does.
Yep, you did it.
They have great. They had fewer people. I was trying to see who needed the most. Yeah, good. Well, it's just all practice.
Yeah.
We're hoping this is going to be in person next year.
Well, hope so. We've got Las Vegas. We're watching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are watching that too. We're anxious to see how that's going to go, and that's going to help guide us next time.
You've got another person in the unassigned.
She's just joining.
Oh, I think she left.
Oh, okay.
We've got a minute and a half to begin to close it.
Okay, they should get a notice, an automatic notice for the last 60 seconds.
Oh, okay. You already set it up. All right.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how to get in to see the counter though. Oh, it's got 40. It must have already given it. This has got 41 seconds left for them, so it should automatically bring them back, or it may be 30 seconds and then a minute, so maybe a minute and a half. That's more close to what you said. We will see.
Was this the background? It got pretty bad at times, didn't it?
Early on, you know what it sounded like? It sounded like a haunted house in the background, but it was way far in the background.
It's my Halloween theme. You found me out.
But after a little bit, after you said that, it wasn't long, and then you couldn't hear it. So you want one more minute, or
no? Go ahead and close them because it'll give them a minute, won't it?
I think, yeah, we'll close it and see what it does.
See what happens.
We just don't. We do these, but just not that much.
It does.
60 seconds. Yep. Great. Okay. Perfect. But yeah, it stopped. I don't know if they stopped doing the construction, but after a bit, you couldn't hear it.
Yeah. My husband, how much time do we have? Well, I'll tell you later.
There they come.
All right, I see our participant number increasing. Folks are leaving their breakouts, coming back into the big room.
Yep, they've got about 10 seconds and they should all be back.
And I have the handouts ready to share with everybody. So we are going to take a look at them and you are going to get them after this.
Great.
There we
That
go.
should be everyone.
Excellent.
Here.
Awesome.
Thank
All right. You know what's coming next. I'm going to ask for a volunteer to report out. Tell me who you are. And I know some of you, so I could just call you all out. Tell me what element you discussed and what ideas you came up with to develop through practices with your colleagues.
I can go. In my group, we discussed challenge growth, and some of the points that came up was back to Danya's conversation of challenging adults to be their authentic self. We also talked about challenging adults to be have a more active role in their child's education, introducing them to how to log into Power School or, engaging them into school events. And then we talked about challenge growth in general when you do interact with adults, just making sure that they have the resources to get to where you want to push them to be.
Right, holding them accountable, right? And I do have a handout. So this is the handout, Renee, you and your team would have ended up with challenge growth. You're going to get this after the session. Here is a list of ways in which you can challenge growth in addition to everything that Renee's group discussed and many others discussed. With colleagues, right? We're talking about the grownups. We're thinking about, yes, and I think, we can talk about our parents in terms of family engagement, and we're also talking about the colleagues in the school building, in our office building. So we can challenge growth by encouraging appropriate autonomy, right? We're not just providing answers, we're letting them think through things. So this is really critical if you're supervising somebody or if you're a lead for a group. We're helping them go beyond, we're helping them promote a growth mindset. So, what do you need to learn about this? Maybe we can learn about this together. Emphasizing continuous improvement, isn't that critical with our colleagues, right? Like, hey, we've been doing this for a long time, but some research has come out and there's another way to do it or approach this problem. We can challenge growth by providing feedback. And you can see that, right, Phyllis, the handout? Okay, great. It says here, get personal when you need or want to ask a young person to try harder. Make time for a one-on-one conversation. Same with grown-ups, right? We all appreciate a little one-to-one time without the phone, without the devices, like just, let's talk, let's just chat. And even through Zoom, that's something that you can do by looking right at the camera. We know when folks are double tasking, multitasking. By using an equity lens, we often get asked, how does SEED and DEI and social, late in the day, I've forgotten the word, the expand possibility work, how does all of that come together with DR? Well, helping students, colleagues see the work, students, opportunities with an equity lens. That's encouraging, challenging growth because we're challenging people to think differently, to learn differently. Developing critical thinking skills, encouraging future thinking, and holding people to goals, right? With this form, it was easy to replace most of the words with a colleague, with a grown-up, with the word grown-up. And we can see how much of the practices that we use to develop increased developmental relationships with kids, we can use with our colleagues. So that was challenge growth. Thank you, Renee and team. By the way, Renee, would you like to share who Dr. V was, and how he or she was important in shaping your professional life?
Sure. So Dr. V was my grad school professor. So in the way that she taught, she was always like um, so authentic. Like you ever been to a class and you're like, oh, this class again. Like I really enjoyed her teaching, her learning, and my background is in social work, so it really shaped my career and what I wanted to focus on.
Great. And the next level for you in thinking about Dr. V or any of us and looking at the people that help shape our professional lives is to think about as we go through these practices together, did this person that we're still all thinking about enough to put next to our name in a Zoom meeting, apply any of these practices? Is something coming off of here that you're like, yep, Dr. V encouraged me to do some future thinking. Dr. V really developed some critical thinking skills, as an example. Thank you, Renee, very much. I'm going to ask for the next group. Do we have another volunteer? A different element. Who worked on something besides challenge growth? Somebody came off mute, I think. No? I do see Mr. Clark in the room. Daryl.
Hey, Patty, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good.
I
Well,
said I was going to call on people I knew. Hey, Daryl.
I was waiting on it. I was waiting. However, I was a part of Renee Drake's group. And so we were the challenge growth.
I see. Okay. I'm going to scroll through here and see who else I know. Let's see. I'm trying to find you guys might be saved in that I can't find my scrolling button. This may not work. Oh, here we go. Brittany Harris. Hi, Brittany.
Hi. Not a lie. We actually have challenge growth, but I wouldn't mind sharing the person that's attached to me.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mine is something similar. I forgot who was just speaking, but it was my professor during undergrad, Dr. Jeff Frederick, and he really pushed me to just really look deeper into the reason why I chose my major and why I was doing certain projects and how it tied back into my personal life. And I would say that he kind of fits into, I don't see the thing, but I can say that he encouraged my future thinking, because even now going to grad school, I was able to talk to him and he was able to help me and be a reference and talk about future projects that I can do. So it was just very special.
Okay, thank you very much. And yes, I think much of what you described is challenge growth. I'm going to close this out. I'm going to move over to expand possibilities because I heard something else he said there, that he helped you with some reference letters for grad school, right? So he opened up, he helped you like make some social connections there that helped you in grad school. Expanding possibilities is just that. With kids, it's helping them develop or an idea, a vision for something outside of what they're used to, outside of their world. And it could be letter writing for colleges and grad school. It could be introducing them to somebody who can teach them a little bit more about an interest that they have and help them make some connections about how possibly they can make some money. I have a nephew, Gabby, who is a genius musician, self-taught, 4 or 5 instruments, composer, very informal, didn't do great in high school, didn't do great in college the first try. And then someone said, hey, I hear you love music and I hear you're also a gamer. Did you know you can do that for a living? So Gabby's in his first semester at San Francisco State University in a program aligned with music and gaming. And it took someone to introduce him to that world and to some people to help them make some connections. So we're expanding possibilities there. What does this look like with our colleagues, with the grown-ups in the school building, in our office building? And it is this is another great tie-in to the DEI work, because we're using, when we talk with them, when we share materials, we're introducing language and materials that's culturally responsive. So we're expanding someone's view of the world in that sense. We're introducing options. If we're supervising people, right? We're introducing options for your staff. We're broadening perspectives for teachers. Sometimes they are so busy, like as we are, and focused in their work that they're not often seeing anything outside of those classroom walls, outside of their lesson plan processes and protocols. And we're helping broaden that perspective a little bit. A number of here taking field trips, so maybe not with our staff, maybe retreats are an opportunity with our colleagues to provide some input on, what we can go visit and experience for ourselves. I know that the DEI cohort a couple of years ago did a couple of traveling trips. They went out to Alabama, and I know they were planning on coming to El Paso to visit the border to learn a little bit more about some of the experiences kids go through in those communities. Making introductions, bringing in speakers, bringing in keynotes for these events, Phyllis and Allison, those of you planning this event. So there are a number of ways that we can expand possibilities with grown-ups in our buildings. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to share a personal one. John O is the gentleman who's listed next to my name. John Ownby worked for the Texas Workforce Commission in Texas when I started with Communities and Schools of El Paso. He was a repositioned staff and he was supervising me. I was about 22 and scared, didn't know what I was doing, needed a lot of help, and would ask him, often wanted him to just do the thing for me or explain something for me. And rather than do a lot of the thing, he'd say, Patty, we've got a manual on that. Where's the manual? What does the manual say? We talked about that last week. What did we say last week? So it was a lot of questions back at me, and what I thought at the time, very little help. Fast forward 30 some odd years later, we're doing this work, and his name out of the blue came to mind when I started thinking about share power. Who was helping me do stuff on my own? Who was partnering with me to do these things? And it was John. At the time, I wasn't very happy with John. We grew to be close friends, and I still think of him, remember him fondly. But he was sharing power with me. This was something really difficult personally for me to do with others. What little I know, I should probably build on what John taught me all those years ago. But this is about establishing norms with people, sharing responsibility, doing things with them as opposed to for them, right? Sometimes we're building relationships with teachers, colleagues in a school, colleagues in our office, and it's just easier to do the thing than to say, here's how I can help you learn how to do this. But sharing power is all about helping somebody do it on their own. Offering explanations. I'm just going to go quickly through this because you all are going to get these handouts too. Be willing to be wrong, admit, you know what, I don't know, Phyllis, the answer to this, or group. Let's figure this out together and we'll get back to you. That's okay. Encouraging voice. What do you think about? And then taking ideas seriously. As opposed to delivering messages and school support plans and student support plans, think about your school support team, really engaging them in the development process. It is hard work, right? To draw ideas out and to partner with people to accomplish something complicated. But this is a part of a developmental relationship. Because it is hard is why I personally probably don't do it very well. And I recognize that and am intentionally working on improving this. That is share power. I'm going to go to expressing care. The research says that organizations such as Communities and Schools does this really well with colleagues and with one another, right? We are great at learning names and sharing our stories and listening to stories. That's why we're in the business that we're in. But here are some other ways in which we can appropriately express care. Again, this document was designed for kids, but we can easily translate this to the grown-ups too, asking about correct pronouns and using correct pronouns. Listen actively, right? Putting down our devices, looking at somebody, looking at our screen. If you need a little bit of time, saying, you know what, I just need a couple of minutes, I really want to hear you. Give me a minute and I'm going to be right with you. Sharing stories, we mentioned, building trust, taking that time to build trust with our colleagues. It doesn't happen overnight. If there's anybody new to a school, I'm sure you have all sorts of stories about what it's been like the last couple of months trying to build trust in a new environment with new colleagues. It takes time. Checking in periodically with people. How is this going? How are you doing? Offering advice carefully with kids and with grown-ups. And then smiling, laughing, being a cheerleader, showing up to events. For our colleagues, it could be, we often have something similar to Lunch and Learns at the national office. And even if it's something that I've already participated in or maybe even helped develop, if my colleagues are delivering it, I will show up to be their cheerleader. And I'll often joke and say, I'm just going to heckle you from the back of the Zoom room. And really, we're the cheerleaders, right? We're there for moral support, much like Phyllis is today for me. Thank you, Phyllis, showing up. So that is express care. And the final element here we're going to talk about is providing support. How do we provide support in practice? Remember, we're talking about building that positive energy, a culture, a climate for grown-ups in your environment. And providing or connecting to resources. So, hey, I don't know how to do this, and I am actually going to provide support for you all in just a bit. The Search Institute has a ton of resources on their website. You're going to get it in a bit, including these handouts that I will gladly send to you, but you can also download from the Search Institute because they own the framework. Removing internal roadblocks. So this is when we help people recognize and counteract ways that they might get in their own way and feel frustrated. Sometimes that's just listening, right? And helping even the grown-ups say, hey, you know, you're your worst critic, Patty. This is fine. Do it again. Maybe we, change this or that, but overall you did a great job. Keeping the eye on the prize, validating feelings, helping them problem solve, advocating for equity for them with students and with the grown-ups in our lives, and using indirect praise. A number of ideas here in which we can build a positive environment for our schools that ends up being felt by the students that we serve. These were all practices. I'm going to share. Let me bring this up. Something else now. Here we go. Let's talk about, now those were practices, energy, climate, environment, right? That feeling we get. Let's talk about activities. Activities are those tangible start and end things that we do. And here, no breakout here. We're just going to talk a little bit about some of the activities that we've seen are working in our communities. So building DR through activities, foundational first, we've got to learn the language. The grown-ups have to understand what the elements are and what they mean so that we can begin to practice them together. The grown-ups in Lucy Laney Elementary School, beginning with the school administrators, were fully versed in developmental relationship framework. Our recommendations here is to start with school administrators. We have a number of resources on our CIS community that you can, create a paragraph, a few talking points when you talk to administrators about what developmental relationships are. You can provide a brief overview of the framework to your school support teams if you haven't already. Again, this is all an effort to make sure we're all speaking the same language. disseminate one-pagers to school staff. Some schools are still using boxes. Others have switched fully to electronic or email. You can email one-pagers to them with a CIS stamp on there. Hey, you know, this is a developmental relationship framework. The more developmental relationships the kids have, the better they do in school. Are you developing developmental relationships? And then maybe it'll trigger a few questions and open a door for you to do a 15-minute presentation, or someone to do a 15-minute presentation. And that, by the way, is the fourth foundational recommendation. And then there are a number of other opportunities here. Create opportunities and activities that help keep the language alive. Once they know it, you know, you can practice it in your check-ins with teachers. You can practice it with students. You can practice it during staff in-services. You can make sure it's in your communications to faculty and staff. It's really, the activities are really just about keeping that language alive. And you can pull from an activity book too that we have. There is an activity book that was designed for kids, but we've pulled a number of activities to work with the grown-ups in our office. We do a Sparks interview, right? Where you ask somebody, what is that spark? What is the thing that gets you up in the morning when you're finding it really difficult to get up? What is the thing that when you remember you get to do that today, you jump out of bed? Sharing strengths, sharing sparks, an activity called My Life 20 Years From Now. There are about 38 or 39 activities in this activity book. I'd encourage, if there's anybody in the room, Phyllis, I'm going to go to the chat for a moment, who has used this activity book, and you've got a favorite activity, to drop it in the chat. Because I would bet money that any of these activities are appropriate, with some very minor modifications, if at all, to use with your colleagues in a school or in an office building.
Ashley says 4S.
Yeah.
Or 4S.
The 4S's, yeah. Yeah, thank you. But there are a number of them. Keep them coming. We're counting on the people that have used this, these materials before. Thank you, Ashley. That activity book can be found on My CIS Community. And if you're new to Communities in Schools, you likely may not be on My CIS Community. It's an internal repository of resources. And you can speak to either your executive director or your CIS community administrator, your supervisor. You just need an email invitation. It'll take you to the website, and then you just log on and change your password. It's pretty easy to get to, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment.
Annette says highs and lows.
Okay, and I think I've got that. Yeah, that was the, yeah. So a number of activities there, structured ways in which you can introduce the language and practice and build developmental relationships between and amongst your colleagues. The final one here is to model that behavior. We're going to end with model behavior because it really is on Communities in Schools for what it's worth, the subject matter experts around the framework, right? We are the ones right now in school communities who can introduce it as a way to change climate, as a way to improve grades, as a way to achieve all of those things on the theory of change that we want to achieve. But it's going to start with the grown-ups. And for right now, it's going to start with Communities in Schools. So we really encourage you all to take a look at the materials, think about it a little differently. If you've already been implementing it, let's get innovative with it. And I'm looking at the program managers, the directors in the room, to engage your staff about how we can use this with our colleagues, how else we can use this with our colleagues. We've got about 4 minutes left, but rather than do this in the chat, I'm just going to ask you to think about how you interact with your colleagues during the course of the work of your day, and think about how you can begin to apply even one thing that you learned today. As you think about that, let me say intentionality is a big part of this work, developmental relationships, because the research has shown that the more if we couple strategy, planning, writing it down, journaling, mapping out the next steps, the likelier we are to do the thing. For those of you familiar with a program like Weight Watchers, it's one of the reasons it's been so successful, that some of us have been so successful with Weight Watchers, in that it encourages journaling, planning, writing things down, and reflecting, right, on what we've done and what we're going to do. And that's intentionality. So rather than walk out of here and say, yeah, I really like it, I think I'm going to do it, think about and write it down. Think about who are the colleagues, how you interact with them, and what is one thing that you can apply in the next month or so that you've learned. If you've got the time, go for it. I'm going to go ahead and advance slides, but I wanted to leave you with the intentionality bit because it's a critical part of this work. With kids, we would ask you the same. How do you work with kids? What kids do you see more often? And how will you apply one thing? Commit to that. Wanted to leave you with some resources as those intentionality statements come into. I mentioned the CIS community earlier. And again, speak with your executive director, your CIS community administrator to gain access to it. But once you're there, you're going to find the activity book that we mentioned earlier. And you'll also find a frequently asked question document and a number of videos and recorded webinars that you can watch, read the scripts from, to learn a little bit more about the framework, either for applying it with grown-ups or with students. For those of you familiar with the assessments, there's data attached to this, and the assessments can be found on the national resource side of the CIS community. Down below, I've also introduced the Search Institute. The website is here, pretty simple, searchinstitute.org. Again, they own the framework and they have a ton of materials around the framework itself. But recently, they've released a number of materials that will help us develop relationship-rich organizations. So truly, an organization that's intentional about this work. Why do we want to think about it? How do you do that? And what are some case studies? And here I've just listed a few articles and blogs that they've got listed there, but and they've also got some workshops available, virtual and in person. So I wanted to expand your possibilities by leaving you with a number of resources. There's one more, and this is the funkiest looking slide. I'm not sure what's going on there, but it is a new program that Communities in Schools is introducing. It's called the Coaching and Adoption Program. So for the program managers, directors, executive directors in the room, this is a way to help an organization go beyond a framework implementation in the schools. This is part of the work with the Search Institute around developing a relationship-rich organization. So think board, think strategy, think infrastructure of an organization. How are we set up as an organization to help site coordinators, graduation coaches, success coaches do that job? How are we supporting that work from the main office? And if you're interested in that, you can just email me. It is a little after 3 o'clock, 3:01. If you've got questions, I'm not sure, Phyllis, if we can hang out for a bit. You can chat. You can also email me. My email address is on the screen. Thank you so much for your time. We are at time, right?
We are at time, and I dropped the evaluation link in the chat. And if you don't get a chance to do that now, it is on the website where you signed up for this session. So just be sure to pick that up and complete your evaluation. And that will help us to continue to improve and bring to you the training and support that you need. So thank you so much, Patty. We have a minute or two, but we have a pretty quick turnaround before the next session, so we probably can't hang around too long so everybody can get where they need to be. But
Thank
if
you
anybody
all.
has any last minute questions, we can have a minute or two. Thank you so much. It
Thank
was
you
good. I
so
wrote down, made a bunch of notes, so
Oh,
I'll be
good.
back in touch. Yeah.
Let me know if I need to resend any of the documents so that we can get that out to everybody.
Okay.
I'm happy to help.
Okay. That sounds great.
All right. I'll enjoy your afternoon. Bye, Daryl. Sorry for putting you on the spot.
No worries, anytime. Good to
Nice
see
seeing
you.
you, sir. Good to
All
see you.
right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.